Israeli airstrikes targeting Hezbollah fighters in Lebanon killed almost 500 people on Monday. The UN foreign policy chief warns that the Middle East is on the brink of a full-blown war.
Ukraine hit 3 Russian munition depots within 4 days over the past week. A leading climate expert explains why rising global temperatures could result in more severe flooding.
More than 490 people died in Israeli airstrikes that targeted Hezbollah fighters in Beirut on Monday, Lebanese authorities said. The Israeli army defended its aerial assault, with a spokesperson stating Hezbollah concealed arms and weapons in residential homes.
Regarding the high number of casualties, everyone is a tragedy in Lebanon. Among those killed were a large number of Hezbollah terrorists who were next to the weapons that we targeted.
The Israeli military warned residents in the city's southern and eastern suburbs to evacuate ahead of its air campaign against the militant group. Thousands fled, with one of Beirut's main highways jammed with cars, representing the biggest exodus in decades. As Tel Aviv steps up its operations against Hezbollah, it continues to shoot down hundreds of rockets fired upon cities such as Haifa in Israel's north. European Union foreign policy chief Josep Burell warned that the escalation between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon might turn into a full-fledged war. He urged that the path towards peace starts with a ceasefire in Gaza.
But the worst scenario, I have to say it, is materializing. The worst expectations are becoming reality. And we need peace in the Middle East, because the ongoing escalation is a danger for the whole region.
Josep Burell also spoke on the war in Ukraine. He expressed his concern that Russia will attempt to destroy Ukraine's energy infrastructure ahead of the winter.
In order to support Ukraine, we have made at the Commission a proposal to raise up to 35 billion euros a loan to support Ukraine, both military and economically. And both things has to be done at the same time. It doesn't make sense to provide with an electricity generator today if it has to be destroyed tomorrow.
Burell applauded Ukraine for their successful efforts in striking and destroying ammunition stockpiles deep into Russia. He said that the G7 will discuss Ukraine's potential use of long-range weapons in the upcoming week.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelinski is in the US this week to amass support for his so-called victory plan, aimed at charting an end to the Russian invasion of his country. The plan requires major commitment from the US and Western allies, in particular permission to use long-range missiles into Russian territory with the aim of degrading Russian military infrastructure. But so far, London and the White House have refused the request for fears of greater escalation. Ukraine says its army is at a serious disadvantage as a result.
I think some of the limits imposed are probably just gonna stay. And I think Zelensky is probably well aware of what these limits are and how difficult and how slow it is to move Biden. But from a negotiating standpoint, maybe if you exert a lot of pressure, you get not everything that you ask for, but you get a bit.
The plan is also likely to include Western security guarantees akin to the Mutual Defence Pact of NATO membership and, crucially, deepening offensive into Kursk to provide territorial bargaining chips for potential negotiations with Russia.
I think we're very, very far from any kind of negotiations for the simple reason that Russia is as aggressive, if not more, now than it was at the beginning of the war. So Russia is not moderating. It's pushing ahead in the Donbass. Putin announced increased levels of mobilization of Russian troops just a couple of days ago. Russia is investing massively in its defense industrial capacity. So Ukraine faces a highly aggressive Russia.
As President Zelensky has said, nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians. Given the current situation with an exhausted army on the battlefield, the constant plea for weapons and then restrictions on how to use them is unsustainable. But he says his plan for victory is a way to resolve all that.
Ukraine hit 3 Russian munitions depots within 4 days over the past week with the domestically produced weapons. The attacks are widely seen as Kyiv demonstrating its ability to strike targets deep into Russia and therefore calling on its Western allies to lift their missile use restrictions and also exposing Moscow's red lines. Here is the timeline. On the 18th of September, Ukraine attacked the depot in Toropets, Tver region. Estonian Defense Forces Intelligence Center stated that the strike caused 30,000 tons of munitions to explode, noting that the size of the explosion equates to 750,000 artillery shells. All in all, that means that the attacks destroyed enough Russian munitions to affect Russian operations in the coming months. Then, a few days later, Kyiv hit the depot in Oktyabrski, about 16 kilometers south of Toropets, and at Tikhoretsk in Krasnodar region. The Ukrainian General Staff reported that the Tikhoretsk arsenal contained at least 2,000 tons of munitions, including munitions from North Korea, at the time of the strike. Kyiv claims it is one of the 3 largest ammunition depots in Russia and one of the key storage facilities in the Russian military logistics systems. The US-based think tank, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, said in February this year that Tikhoretsk was one of a number of Russian ammunition sites that had been expanded to store munitions closer to the front lines. The Institute for the Study of War says that continued Ukrainian strikes against rear Russian logistics facilities within Russia will generate wider operational pressures on the Russian military, including forcing Moscow to reorganize and disperse support and logistics systems within Russia to mitigate the impact of such strikes.
German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's Social Democrat Party narrowly beat the far right in the Brandenburg elections yesterday. With all eyes on the East German state elections that took place this month, it seems that the established parties have a long road ahead before the federal elections next year. Political expert Dr. Jan Philipp Tomaszek says the situation is tough.
Also erstmal kann man sagen, dass jetzt durchatmen kann, denn Brandenburg hat gewonnen und die SPD ist stärkste Kraft geworden. Anders als in Thüringen und Sachsen, da sah es ja sehr schlecht aus. Das heißt, dieser Trend hat sich jetzt nicht fortgesetzt, sondern die SPD hat gezeigt, dass sie auch noch Wahlen gewinnen kann.
And what happens now?
Also als nächstes kommen natürlich die Koalitionsgespräche. Brandenburg braucht eine Regierung und eigentlich gibt es nur eine Variante, nämlich dass SPD und BSW zusammenarbeiten. Das ist die Frage, ob sie das schaffen. Wenn sie das nicht schaffen, dann gibt es Neuwahlen und dann gibt es natürlich wieder einen Wahlkampf und ein ganz neues Ergebnis. Ich glaube aber, dass die AfD davon eigentlich nur profitieren würde. Von daher ist das auch nicht im Interesse der anderen Parteien.
Although AfD has made major gains in all 3 eastern state elections, they will be unable to govern as all parties have vowed not to cooperate with them. We asked Potsdam residents what they made of the vote.
Ich finde es gut, dass die AfD nicht stärkste Kraft geworden ist, auch wenn sie viel zu viele Stimmen bekommen hat aus meiner Sicht. Ich hoffe, dass es die Möglichkeit gibt, die AfD inhaltlich zu stellen und zu zeigen, dass sie eigentlich keine Angebote hat, die wirklich das Land Brandenburg voranbringen.
Also ja, ich habe gestern gewählt und ich fand die Wahlergebnisse deutlich besser als in manchen anderen Bundesländern.
Coalition negotiations in the other states of Thuringia and Saxony have not yet concluded. Both the Greens and the FDP have been kicked out of the state parliaments. For the Greens, it was a close call, but the Liberals will now be fighting for their survival. Now that the 3 East German state elections of Thuringia, Saxony and Brandenburg are over, political pressure is mounting on the Liberals. German Finance Minister Christian Lindner is under immense pressure to make key decisions before Christmas this year, as many are now wondering if the FDP will even survive in the coalition government until the federal elections next year. Liv Stroud in Potsdam for Euronews.
Extreme floods, such as those that have devastated Central Europe in recent weeks, are likely to become more frequent as the Earth's temperature rises. That's according to a leading Austrian climate research expert, who says these events that were once expected to occur every 100 years may now happen every 80 to 90 years.
Wir erwärmen uns derzeit mit einer Geschwindigkeit, also die Erde als Ganzes, von ca. 14 Hiroshima-Atombomben pro Sekunde. Das ist die Zusatzenergie, die eben, wie wir als Menschen derzeit dem System Erde hinzufügen, mit dem sich die Erde erwärmt. Und das führt eben dazu, dass die Luft auch mehr Wasserdampf enthalten kann und solcher Starkregen auch extremer wird.
Flooding across Central Europe, triggered by Storm Boris, has destroyed homes and public infrastructure and killed at least a dozen people. In the St. Pölten area of Lower Austria last weekend, up to 430 litres of rain per square metre fell within a few days, a volume that usually falls over 6 to 9 months.
Was wir jetzt schon sagen können, ist, dass der gesamte Bereich über Mitteleuropa, sowohl die Ozeane als auch die Landmassen, heutzutage um 2 bis 3 Grad wärmer sind im Vergleich zu vorindustrieller Zeit durch den menschengemachten Eingriff, durch die Emissionen von klimawirksamen Treibhausgasen. Und das führt dazu, dass eben diese gesamten Luftmassen, nicht nur die warmen, feuchten Mediterranen, sondern auch diese polaren, kalten Luftmassen um diese 2 bis 3 Grad wärmer sind und somit pro Grad Erwärmung um 7% mehr Wasserdampf aufnehmen können, wenn sie gesättigt sind. Heißt, dieses gesamte Konglomerat an Luftmassen kann im Vergleich zu vorindustrieller Zeit jetzt 15 bis 20% mehr Wasserdampf aufnehmen.
It's estimated that repairing the damage caused by the floods will cost more than €1 billion.